Hey everyone, it's Sevy. It's been a while since we've managed to access the R5 Cinnabar Spindle, and Albedo havers are absolutely having a blast with using it. It's definitely a cracked weapon on him given that we can get it for absolutely free. Now I was curious, how good could it be as a free 4-star weapon versus other more exclusive 5-star weapons? That's why in this video, I'll be sharing with you my comparison and results of the Cinnabar Spindle versus the Skyward Blade, Freedom Sworn, Summit Shaper, Mistsplitter Reforged, and Primordial Jade Cutter. Can the Cinnabar Spindle beat these weapons in terms of damage and utility? Let's find out. First, the damage testing methodology and conditions are as follows. The weapons will be tested against the Cryo-Regis Vine. Albedo is using a 4-piece husk set, and all damage will be taken having maximum stacks on. These are his base stats with the Cinnabar Spindle on. As you can see, the crit stats are well balanced for actual real usage. 3 will have the Geo-Resonance buff active by having a shield on at all times. 4, if the weapons have any special effects, they will be triggered whenever possible for maximum damage on Albedo. These are Summit Shaper's attack percent bonus and Mistsplitter's elemental damage bonus. And 5, food buffs will be eaten to provide 282 defense and 25% geo damage bonus. This is to help simulate having Goro. However, it won't be an equal comparison, and Goro's actual buffs will yield far better results. So we'll compare the damage results of these weapons on Albedo's skill, C0 burst, and C2 burst. I won't put them in percent differences anymore, but the results will speak for themselves. It's also important to note how I tried to fairly balance the crit stats of the Primordial Jade Cutter. Since it gives a ton of crit rate, I had to switch my circlet and another artifact to give me more crit damage. The resulting crit stats are as follows. Clearly, the conversion is not perfect since I can still add a bit of 16% crit damage in exchange for the crit rate to the Primordial Jade Cutter stats. The resulting defense stat was also lessened by around 100. This is obviously not ideal for the Jade Cutter, so we have to theoretically compensate for it for a bit of a fairer and more accurate reading. That's also taking into account that my Jade Cutter is at R2, which gives it a very small advantage over its competition. Hence, I'll show the compensated damage numbers to the test of the Jade Cutter when it's applicable. The Skyward Blade also gives a bit of crit rate from its passive effect. However, I won't balance it anymore with more crit damage since the increase is just too small. Just something to take note of as well. With those in mind, let's proceed to the damage comparison. Let's start with the skill damage. I'll group together the 3 lowest half and the 3 highest half separately. We first have the Summit Shaper, Freedom Sworn, and Skyward Blade. Unsurprisingly, they are the lowest damage dealers since their stats and effects don't affect Albedo's defense or skill at all. Summit Shaper and Skyward Blade will deal the exact same damage, which is 16,615. Freedom Sworn does a little bit more since it has a damage bonus increase in its passive effect, just marginally better at 17,175. How far are they from the top 3 contenders? Let's see. As you can see, it's no surprise that the R5 Cinnabar Spindle is the winner at 27,000. The runner-ups are the Mistsplitter and the Jade Cutter. Even if the Jade Cutter and Mistsplitter don't affect Albedo's defense, thanks to their crit stats and the Mistsplitter's elemental damage bonus, they are ahead of the rest. They also have a somewhat smaller gap between them that can fluctuate depending on your crit and defense stats. So there's no contest that in terms of skill damage, the R5 Cinnabar Spindle will beat any 5-star weapon. The only possible one that can come close is an R5 Mistsplitter, but that's a ridiculous comparison to make. Now the burst comparison is where it gets more exciting. Let's start with the damage at C0. And to refresh your memory, Albedo's C0 only scales on his attack, so the Cinnabar Spindle's defense scaling effects have no power here. First, the 3 lowest contenders. Now the tables have turned, and predictably, the Cinnabar Spindle falls to last place when it comes to the burst. The Skyward Blade and Freedom Sworn do significantly higher damage versus the Cinnabar Spindle. The top 3 are now the Summit Shaper and Mistsplitter, almost on equal footing, with the Jade Cutter pulling ahead. The Jade Cutter manages an impressive first place with quite the gap. Even if we're to consider it as R1 and rebalance the stats, it clearly pulls ahead of the rest thanks to its attack bonus effect and the opportunity to stack higher crit damage. But what if we consider Albedo C2, which addresses his split scaling? With C2, he has a stacking mechanic wherein every stack gained from triggering his skill increases his burst damage by 30% of Albedo's defense. We can gain a maximum of 4 stacks, which means 120% defense burst damage bonus. So will the Cinnabar Spindle be able to compete better now? Unfortunately, it's not enough to even place it in the top 3. The 3 lowest contenders are the same as before: the Skyward Blade, Freedomsworn, and the Cinnabar Spindle. Now, to be fair, the Cinnabar Spindle managed to close the gap significantly against these other 2 weapons. The burst damage is now very close even compared to their C0 counterparts. Even the Fatal Blossoms are higher than the other 2. I'd say that's impressive enough for a free-to-play weapon versus these gacha 5-star weapons. And again, the Summit Shaper, Mistsplitter, and Primordial Jade Cutter are at 3rd, 2nd, and 1st place respectively. But of course, Albedo excels in doing damage over time as a sub-DPS, thanks to his skill ticks, which can have almost 100% uptime. Damage per screenshot isn't everything. So what if we add all these together to simulate a full rotation on Albedo's skill and C0 burst damage? This, I think, is the more important metric to measure Albedo's total damage output with. Let's consider that Albedo's skill damage ticks 6 times over 12 seconds for every time he can cast his burst. The results are as follows. This table shows a range of non-crit to crit values. It also shows just how huge the consideration of crit values is. The Jade Cutter is among the bottom 3 on non-crit and at the top at full crit. Taken all together, this shows that the Cinnabar Spindle, considering that it deals so much more damage consistently compared to the other weapons, will be just as good as a Jade Cutter and Mistsplitter when it comes to total damage over time. I can definitively say that this weapon is cracked considering the value it holds. We have a clear winner for Albedo. Finally, I'd like to make some last notes about the Freedomsworn and Skyward Blade. While the other weapons are all about the damage output on Albedo, these 2 weapons will have different gameplay experiences. The Freedomsworn is a support-oriented weapon. On Albedo, it will generate stronger crystallized shields and give his entire team additional damage buffs. As such, its utility extends beyond damage dealing and provides something the other weapons can't. Still, it's good to know it still manages to provide good damage over time. As for the Skyward Blade, while it's the weakest weapon overall, the real advantage it has is making his burst extremely spammable by giving you all the energy recharge you need. However, it's a bit overkill for me already since Albedo won't need that high of an ER, especially if paired with other Geo characters. In fact, even with that consideration, I'd still recommend the Cinnabar Spindle. Unfortunately for Skyward Blade, it's the overall weakest 5-star in Albedo's hands and is much better utilized by other characters. So everyone, that's it for my comparison of Cinnabar Spindle versus 5-star swords. The value that it provides on Albedo is so good considering that it's a 4-star weapon that can go toe-to-toe with the strongest DPS swords currently. Of course, the caveat is that for now, it's only really usable on Albedo, but my god is it insane on him. I hope that when Albedo gets a rerun in the future, this weapon will find a way to return, because it would be so unfortunate for future new players and Albedo wanters to not be able to use this on him. For Albedo havers, are you sticking with the Cinnabar Spindle or will you use another sword on him? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already for more Genshin Impact guides, and I will see you soon. Take care!